Mike, and we are back. We left and we're going to get the input from Mr. George Coupe concerning the VAT situation and the tax situation in France, because we need to learn from what has transpired from people who have been in the VAT business far longer than us. George.
Okay. The first time we heard of VAT in France was in 1954. There was a law, and it takes 13 years for the VAT to be implemented in France. So it has been implemented in 67. And at the beginning we had several rates, we still have, but those rates have to be modified since then. So most of the sales and services now in France are charged 20%. But you still have rates of what we call intermediate rates, 7 or 5.5. There is a reduced one. In the reduced one you have 5.5 and 2.1, and there is a 0 rated, for example, for teaching, medical, and...
0 for medical?
Yeah. Medical and paramedical activities.
Yeah.
Zero.
Rate. And that's a country like France.
Yeah.
So what does it tell you?
It's important,
yes,
you see, to educate people.
Yes.
So if you are in the teaching activity, it's normal not to charge you for that.
Correct. Yeah.
The same for medical activities, because everybody needs to be cured.
Yeah. You know, as you talk about medical facilities, 2 nights ago, I was watching our local TV, and I saw several people standing outside the health center and on Chaussee Road, and they were quite irate over the fact that there were insufficient nurses to take care. They had been there for a long time. The places were jam-packed, and it really hurt me to see a situation like that. And hearing you talk about a 0 rating, when in fact our government only recently took off, I think they exempted 0 rate on medical. But I think he said, the Prime Minister said only for a short time, until April.
Yeah, 0 rated, yeah.
He took off on prescription drugs only, but made it very clear that it's going to stay on the others. And I understand that the government and the Prime Minister needs the money, but as you rightly pointed out, there are areas that will affect the entire community, and that needs to be focused upon, because the general cry in the region is the fact that we are spending too much. And I remain convinced that there are areas in government that are non-productive and should be dealt with, you know. I know the Prime Minister has defended his cause, but I think the large number of embassies we have abroad and the various consultants here are sucking too much of our money that we can ill afford. I mean, it's nice to have them, but can we afford that luxury? So many of us would like to drive a Mercedes and BMW. Can we afford it? No. Maybe we should be riding a bicycle. Now, would you please continue on what you were indicating?
Yeah, I just want to add that prescription is charged 2.1%.
2%, yeah.
That's not much.
Not much, yeah.
Okay. The problem we have with the taxes, they have been modified, I told you several times since the beginning. The problem we have now is what Richard was saying about. This is general in every country. You think at the beginning, when you put that, you think that the state, the nation will get money from that. But the one paying that at the end of the chain is the citizen. Since that increases the price, the people, if there is no growth, on the other hand, if there is no growth, the people are getting poor and poor, you see? So the next year, they cannot spend the same money. And you can see that less people in the shops, less items in the shop, the prices are going down. And you should find another way. Growth is one, but it's a political objective to make a way for a country to grow and to have growth. We have the same problem in France. For the first quarter this year, the growth has been 0.
Wow.
In the meantime, in UK it was 0.8, which is not bad. But the budget in France has been made with an assumption of 2% for the year.
Growth.
Yeah.
And
That is the government assumption.
and
not-
if,
not
if,
the
and,
European
if,
country.
and if that doesn't happen, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
You end up with a deficit. Yeah.
So let me give you some figures
Sure.
about, it's from 2007. The expenditure in France were 334 billion euros.
In 07.
Yeah. The takings were 292.
So they're down.
That leads to a deficit of 42 billion euros.
Right.
And every year it's going bad and bad, worse and worse.
Worse.
You see? So, what can you do? You can either print some banknotes,
Yes.
but that is not fair,
Yeah.
as there was an agreement between the countries. When you print some banknotes, you should have a Federal Reserve of gold to
To back it up.
compensate that.
Correct.
Yes. So that is no longer true. The other way for a government, the easiest way, I should say, is to increase the taxes or find new taxes. But the problem is the same as I was telling some minutes ago. The people are becoming poorer and poorer. And it's a vicious circle, you see.
Yeah. You see,
So you have to find another way.
yeah. Now, here in the Caribbean, a few years ago, they found the way. They were floating bonds. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I think St. Lucia, in the last number of years, could be have sold almost $1.4 billion in bonds. Would that be correct, Richard?
I don't know the exact figure of the total public debt, the level of the amount that is due for bonds and treasury bills, maybe in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Not just in recent years. It's an accumulation
Oh,
over time.
I
Yeah.
know, but for St. Lucia or the OECS?
That's just in Lucia.
That's St. Lucia. Now, that's an awful lot of money. Now, to me, borrowing money or taking money from bonds is equivalent to printing money, because you're actually bringing in money that you are unable to pay back. So what is going to happen at the end of the day? Because we know for a fact already in St. Kitts it started. It first started off by saying that we'll give you 5% on your bonds. You're not going to get the 5%. And I saw a letter written to an investor where they said to him, we'd advise you to settle for 50% of what you invested. Now, you look at it from an angle. Let us assume that I'm a business person. I take $1 million and put into bonds. $1 million of my hard-earned money, of which I pay taxes on. And all of a sudden they tell me I have to lose $500,000. That is going to set me back in two ways. One, mentally,
Financially.
financially. And do you think that I am going to go and take my little bit of money now and reinvest into a country that has done that to me? Why? I have made it very clear that as a business person, when we need money, we have to go to a banker and say, look at me, I want a loan of X million dollars because I'm going to build something. I have to produce, I have to come to Richard and produce a statement, a financial report to show how I'm going to pay the money back. I make my projections, I fail to make the projections, and the following year the bank says, you're not getting any more money, friend, because you have not been able to honor your agreement. What do I do then? Okay? And politicians have to understand that we are the ones, the private sector is the one churning the economy. And if we cannot go on and be successful and put aside some money so we can build, we are heading downwards. What advice you give me as an accountant?
Well, I'd certainly like to, I wouldn't like to feel we're heading downwards because, as I say, if you feel there's no future, then you just leave.
You just leave.
But it's a problem that, as George said, countries all over the world found themselves in, and in Europe in particular, and France in particular, where the level of borrowing because of deficits, annual deficits, became so huge that they were not able to borrow at what would be regarded as rates that are affordable. And in Europe, I mean, even a 6% rate on a bond is regarded as too high.
Yeah.
We are paying 7.5. That's what we have to pay to sell our bonds. Now,
But
that's
without cutting short, there's a standard thing. When these things reach 7.5,
Yeah.
it becomes precarious. Something is
becomes-
wrong.
yeah, it
so it
becomes
raises a red
unsustainable.
flag anyway.
But it is clear, and it has been admitted that the deficit as a percentage of GDP, when in 2012 it was 9.7, it was far too high. It should be down to something like 3. And while it reduced in 2013, it clearly has to go down further. The problem St. Lucia has now is that it is really and truly not able to sell bonds any longer. It is overexposed in the market, and while they had projected to sell 267 million of bonds and treasury bills in 2013, they were in fact only able to sell, I think, in the region of 50. Now, wisely, they decided not to go to market, not to take on certain capital projects, and so therefore the level of expenditure went down. But the investors have told, through the brokers and so on, have been quite clear that as a country you're overexposed, your debt to GDP is too high, your annual deficits are too high, and so therefore it's not going to be easy to sell your bonds. And if it is, it's going to be at prices and costs that are unsustainable. And so I believe in this budget that while there are bonds projected, it's a different way of trying to raise the money through public-private partnerships, design, control, bolt arrangements, etc., etc. That's a reality.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario is the St. Kitts and now Grenada, where basically those people who bought your bonds were told or are being told,
Yeah.
sorry, you're only going to get 50% back.
Yeah.
And what that suggests, if people believe this is going to happen in island after island after island,
Yeah.
they're not going to take
Now,
the risk of
for you,
buying
Richard.
anymore.
Supposing that I'm an investor
Yeah.
and they're going to give me 50%. I say, okay, fine, I want my money now. What's the next step?
It doesn't work that way. Essentially, if you look at what happened in St. Kitts, you had help from the multilaterals, both government and the creditors formed committees. They met, they discussed it, they were given options.
Yeah.
Some options meant you get paid now, but you only get so much. You get paid over time, you get so much. It wasn't just not an overnight
You know what's
situation.
worrying me even more? I made a point about entrepreneurs like myself investing who now would be concerned about investing because of the return we're going to, the non-return on our investment. I got a letter last week or from somebody, but I think it's common knowledge, that First National Bank, which has paid dividends for years, for the last 14 years, will not pay any dividends as of this year. Now, that is another big problem because there are several people who've invested their money who rely upon these dividends to pay their bills. 2 questions for you, Richard. Why is it that First National Bank have taken that decision? And secondly, what are the repercussions from what I've indicated to all those people who are not going to be getting their money? How is it further going to affect the economy of St. Lucia?
Well, it has an impact whenever that happens. It's sad in a way when a shareholder is not able to get a dividend, and I'm sure they've expressed that at their annual meetings. First National couldn't do it because they simply did not make enough money. I think it's a very small profit this year, and because of loan losses, they had to take some of those losses back last year. So effectively, over the last 2 years, they've made losses.
Right.
And when you make losses, it is just not prudential or makes sense that you pay dividends. You can't, right? It's just going to make matters worse. You need the money to on-lend and for future growth, et cetera, et cetera. They would like to believe, I am sure, that hopefully is a one-off and that maybe in the future, when they get back to growth, they will be able to resume dividends. Bank of St. Lucia had similar issues.
Yeah.
So that really has to do more with the banking problems, which I think we were going to talk about a little later on.
Yes.
So, it's as I say, it's a difficult situation, but it's one that we all have to face up to. Fortunately for us, both on government instruments and on dividends, they're tax-free. So at least it meant that the level of taxation, we didn't really have to pay much.
Yeah.
But not getting anything, if you were used to getting a certain level,
Yeah.
is in fact a problem. Heineken, for example, have just were able to resume and pay full dividends.
I saw that.
And so it's not across the board. And you will get from time to time certain industries being worse affected than others. The hope is that it is not, you know, almost right across the board, so that all of your investments you're getting nothing on.
Okay.
And that the banks can, in fact, after they've gone through and taken their licks in terms of loan losses and whatnot, can get back to a point of profitability so that, you know, you can get returns.
But Richard, if the bank is taking their licks, okay, and the economy continues to deteriorate, and the bank can only make money by on lending and getting, what is going to happen? We're going to deal with that on the last segment of our program. This is Open Mic. We're going to take a break.